All right, so get ready to dive deep because today we're tackling something pretty complex and personal for, I think, a lot of us, especially if you grew up with some version of Christianity.
Right.
We're talking about deconstruction.
Yeah.
The whole thing of like questioning your faith, even maybe leaving it behind. And it feels like it's everywhere, right?
It seems to be.
Like it's the topic of the moment.
Yeah.
You've sent in a fascinating book to guide our deep dive.
Yeah.
Before you lose your faith. So let's unpack this together.
Okay.
Like, how many people have you seen sharing their deconstruction stories online?
So many.
It's like a rite of passage now. You know?
It is. It's everywhere you look.
Like even Rhett and Link.
Oh, yeah.
From Good Mythical Morning, went from like youth pastors to publicly deconverting.
Yeah.
What's going on,
Well, I mean, it's definitely more than just like deciding not to go to church anymore.
Yeah.
This book, it really emphasizes that it's like this really systematic way of picking apart everything you thought you knew about your faith.
Yeah.
Especially how you were raised.
Like taking a magnifying glass to every belief, every doctrine.
Exactly.
And being like, does this check out?
Yeah.
So like renovating a house.
Yeah.
You're not just tearing it down to tear it down.
Yeah.
You're hoping to rebuild something.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully better, right?
Exactly. And some people, after this deconstruction, they do end up, reconstructing their faith, maybe in a new way, maybe a different religion even.
Wow.
Yeah. But some people, they move on from organized religion altogether.
And you're so right about the internet. It's like it just throws fuels on the fire.
Doesn't it?
Like it used to be that, maybe you had one friend or a relative at Thanksgiving who was like the skeptical one.
Right.
But now you can find a whole community online like that afternoon.
That's right. You can just instantly find people who agree with your doubts and everything.
It's like this 24/7 echo chamber.
That's a good way to put it. The book actually argues that the internet has made, deconstruction more kind of common, more normalized, because it's not just about finding those people. It's about it's suddenly seeming okay to doubt.
It makes you wonder, is deconstructing even countercultural anymore? It's almost like the trendy thing to do these days,
Yeah, and Brett McCracken, in Chapter 3, he makes a really interesting argument about that. He actually says that leaving organized religion is becoming more mainstream, especially in Western culture. He's saying the really radical thing, the more countercultural thing is actually to stick with your faith, even when it's difficult, when it feels like everyone else is jumping ship.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
What makes him say that?
Well, he points out that so much of, especially Western culture, is built on individualism, on prioritizing your own personal happiness above all else.
Right.
And religion, with its rules and doctrines, it can clash with that individual pursuit of whatever makes you happy.
It's true.
So in a way, walking away from faith can feel like the path of least resistance,
So it's like choosing the easy way out, almost.
In some ways, maybe.
Huh. So sticking with it, like grappling with the tough stuff and trying to make it work in a culture that's telling you to just do you.
Yeah.
That's becoming its own form of like rebellion.
You could say that.
Wow.
And, that leads to another path that people often find themselves on during deconstruction, which is progressive Christianity.
Okay, so I feel like we need to define that.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling it can mean a lot of different things to different people.
It definitely can. It's not a simple thing to define. There's no one group that's like, this is it. But broadly, it tends to emphasize social justice, personal experience over really strict doctrine and a more kind of open view of Scripture.
I can see the appeal, especially for people who feel like kind of let down by more traditional churches.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's this one story that really stuck with me. In Chapter 2, Ian Harbour talks about how he left evangelicalism for this more like progressive approach.
Yeah.
But he ultimately found it unfulfilling.
Interesting.
It's like it tries so hard to be like relevant and relatable that it loses something.
Yeah, it can sometimes feel a little shallow, know. And I mean, it's not to say that it can't be a fulfilling path for some people.
Sure.
But as Harbour's story shows, it's not a guarantee.
Right.
It's just one piece of a much bigger picture.
So if deconstruction is all about questioning and maybe even leaving some things behind, is there a way to do it that's actually constructive?
That is the question, isn't it? Well, in Chapter 4, Hunter Beaumont, he presents this idea that he calls disenculturation. I know, it sounds complicated.
Yeah.
But think of it like this. Imagine you grow up loving peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because that's all your family ever eats, right?
Right.
And then you go out into the world, you travel, and you realize, oh, people eat like other things besides PB&J.
Mind-blowing.
It is. It's like this whole world opens up.
Right.
And you don't necessarily have to give up your PB&Js, but you start to separate the thing you love, the peanut butter and jelly, from the way you were raised with it.
So are you saying that some of what we call Christianity might just be like cultural baggage?
It might be.
Like the core message is one thing, but how we're taught to do it might just be our version, our time and place.
Exactly. And that's what Beaumont's getting at. We need to disentangle the core of our faith from the cultural stuff we've picked up along the way.
Yep.
And that process of separating them out, that can be a key part of deconstruction.
Okay.
It helps you see your faith in a new light.
It's like you're seeing it for the first time.
Yeah. It's like you're saying, oh, wow, there's a whole menu out there.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize.
It's not just PB&J.
Right. And maybe there's something even better out there.
Right. Right.
We never know.
And it makes you realize how much we just kind of inherit our faith without even knowing it.
That's true.
We grow up with it, whatever it is, a certain set of beliefs, a certain way of practicing our faith, and we don't question it. It's just, those are the rules, so we play the game.
Exactly.
But what if those rules are kind of arbitrary? What if they're more about like our culture than about like actual faith?
That's a big question that a lot of people are grappling with these days.
For sure.
And it can be really, really tough.
Yeah.
Like really unsettling.
Yeah, because you start questioning those things. You're questioning like who you are.
Yeah.
Your identity.
Our whole foundation.
Like it can feel like you're pulling on a loose thread and the whole thing might unravel.
And you don't know what's underneath.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary. That's why this book really emphasizes finding good people to go on this journey with.
Totally.
It's one thing to do it online by yourself with strangers, but it's a whole other thing to have people who can support you.
Yeah, who you trust.
Who you trust, exactly, who can help you figure out what's true, what's not, who can challenge you.
It's like having a guide, you know.
Yeah, like a Sherpa.
When you're climbing a mountain.
Yes, exactly. You need somebody who knows the way.
It's someone who's been there before.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of challenges.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that trips people up, I think, with Christianity is this whole social justice thing.
Yeah.
It feels like there's this real tension between what a lot of churches are preaching and what's happening in the world.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's a huge sticking point for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And this book doesn't shy away from that at all. In fact, Thaddeus Williams, he has a whole chapter on it, chapter 9.
Wow.
And he really pushes back against this idea that Christianity is like inherently oppressive.
That's a bold statement considering, you know, how religion's been used throughout history, including Christianity.
Oh, absolutely. He's not denying that, but he says, look at the Bible.
Okay.
It's full of stories of God being on the side of the marginalized, the oppressed, the outcast.
Like Jesus himself is a refugee.
Exactly. A political revolutionary.
Wow, yeah.
Who challenged the powers that be.
So he's saying that to ignore social justice is to kind of miss the point of the gospel.
In a way, yeah. He's saying it should be central to our faith.
It's not just some like add-on.
Exactly.
It's not a side issue. It's it's the core of it.
Yeah, it's integral to what it means to follow Jesus, he's saying.
It's refreshing to hear that, honestly.
Yeah.
Because so many people are leaving faith because they feel like it's at odds with their values.
It's encouraging to see people trying to reclaim it, you know?
Yeah. And it's not just social justice, right? There's this whole like science versus faith thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're always portrayed as being at war.
Oh, right.
And I think for a lot of people, especially people who really value like logic and evidence, that can feel like a bridge too far.
It can feel impossible to reconcile.
Totally.
And that's where Keith Plummer comes in.
Okay.
It's at chapter 10.
Okay.
And he says, we got to be careful not to confuse science with scientism.
Okay, so define scientism for me.
It's this belief that science is the only way to know anything. That if you can't prove it in a lab, it's not true.
Like it's just your opinion.
Right, exactly.
Or even worse, it's like superstition.
Exactly. And Plummer says science is great. It's a great tool.
Yeah.
But it has limits.
It can tell us how things work, but not necessarily why.
Exactly. It can explain the mechanics of a sunset.
Right.
But can it explain the awe we feel when we see it?
Right. Science can't, measure that.
Right.
It can't quantify that.
Exactly. And that's where faith comes in.
Okay.
It offers a different kind of knowledge.
Meaning.
Meaning, purpose.
Yeah.
Things that science can't fully grasp.
So it's not that science is the enemy.
No, not at all.
It's one piece.
It's one way of looking at the world.
Of a much bigger picture. Okay, let's talk about something that comes up a lot in these conversations. And honestly, it's one I struggle with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
It's a really tough one.
It is.
This idea of eternal punishment. A loving God sending people to suffer forever.
It's a hard concept to wrap your head around.
It's a deal breaker for a lot of people.
It is. And it's not something to take lightly.
Yeah.
But it's also something that we have to approach thoughtfully.
So how does this book handle it?
Well, Joshua Ryan Butler, in chapter 11, he has a really interesting take on it.
Okay.
He says, we have to be careful not to, impose our modern ideas onto ancient texts.
What does that mean?
Like our modern picture of hell with the fire and the devils and all that.
Yeah, fire and brimstone.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from Dante's Inferno.
Oh, interesting.
Which is a work of art, not a theological textbook.
Right, right.
He's saying if we go back to the Bible and we really look at the language, we might come away with a different understanding.
So it's about going back to the source.
Going back to the source.
Getting rid of all the baggage we've added on over the centuries.
Exactly.
And seeing it with fresh eyes.
Yes.
So it's not that he's saying hell isn't real.
Right. He's not saying it's not serious. He's just saying, let's be honest about what the text actually says.
Let's not let our fears or even our pop culture define it for us.
He's advocating for a more nuanced view.
It's like we have to deconstruct hell.
In a way. Yeah.
Reconstruct a more accurate picture. And maybe a more helpful one, honestly.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
It's like this whole conversation.
It's about taking it apart.
Yeah.
Seeing what's really there.
And maybe putting it back together in a way that makes more sense.
Exactly.
One more thing I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
A lot of these deconstruction stories talk about this feeling of, freedom.
Yeah.
Outside of the church.
Yeah. They can finally be themselves.
Exactly.
Without all the rules.
Without the judgment.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if part of what's going on is people are just looking for a more authentic way to connect with something bigger than themselves.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Linneman, he talks about that in chapter 12.
Okay.
He says, look, we all crave that.
We want to belong.
We want to belong. We want to be seen.
Seen for who we are.
Yes.
Not who we think we should be.
And for a lot of people, they haven't found that in the church.
So is he saying the church is the problem?
Not necessarily. He says, for a lot of people, the church has been a place of hurt, of pain, of disappointment, even trauma.
Right.
But he also wonders if we've just forgotten what real Christian community is supposed to look like.
So it's not that church is inherently bad.
Right.
It's that maybe we're doing it wrong.
Maybe.
So how do we do it right then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
He says, we need to rethink what it means to be the church.
Okay.
It's not about fitting in perfectly.
Yeah.
It's about showing up messy, flawed as we are.
Being real with each other.
Being real, being vulnerable.
Offering grace.
Yes. It's about being the kind of people, the kind of community you want to be a part of.
Where it's safe to doubt, to question.
Exactly.
To not have it all figured out.
Because none of us do.
Right. And that's okay.
That's more than, that's the whole point, I think.
It's like you were saying about disenculturation. Maybe we need to strip away our image of church.
Yeah.
The buildings, the ritual.
All the expectations.
And get back to the real messy human part of it.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, yeah. But okay, let's be real. At the center of all of this is Jesus.
It all comes back to him, doesn't it, right?
All this wrestling with faith and doubt and deconstruction, it ultimately comes down to, who is this guy?
That's the question, yeah.
And Derek Rishmali, chapter 13, he really challenges us on that.
Does he?
Yeah, he talks about the danger of creating a fan fiction Jesus.
Oh, interesting. So we make him into what we want him to be.
Exactly. Instead of wrestling with the real Jesus.
Right, the one in the gospel.
We end up with this watered down version.
Yeah, palatable.
That fits into our little worldview.
Like a what would Jesus do bracelet.
Exactly. And Rishmali's point is, when we do that, we miss like the actual power of who Jesus is.
And that's the challenge.
Right, because Jesus in the gospel.
He was disruptive.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was not afraid to like shake things up.
He made people uncomfortable.
He did. He called people out.
Yes.
It wasn't about blind faith or easy answers.
Right.
It was about like this deep transformation.
Yes. A change of heart.
Yeah. And that's a lot harder.
It's much harder
Than just wearing a bracelet, you know?
It is. It requires something of us.
This whole conversation has just made me realize how much our culture shapes our faith.
It does. We're swimming in it.
It's like it's the water we're swimming in, and we don't even realize it.
Exactly. And that's why, this book, Before You Lose Your Faith, it's such a good reminder that deconstruction, it can actually be a good thing.
It can make your faith stronger.
Stronger, more authentic.
More real.
If we approach it with humility,
Yeah. It's not about tearing it all down just to tear it down.
It's about finding the truth.
Yes. So for someone listening right now who's like in it, they're in the thick of it, they're questioning everything.
What advice would you give them?
What advice would you give them?
First of all, don't panic.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
It's okay to doubt.
It's normal.
It's part of the journey.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're a bad Christian.
Not at all.
Or that you're not smart enough or whatever we tell ourselves.
It just means you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't be afraid of the questions.
Even the scary ones.
Even the really tough ones.
Well,
talk to people.
Find your people.
Yes. Find people who get it.
Who've been there.
Who can support you.
Yeah, because it's so much easier.
So much easier.
When you're not alone.
You don't have to do this alone.
Well, this has been quite a journey.
It has. A lot to think about.
We've covered so much ground.
So many important questions.
And hopefully, given you some things to chew on.
Some food for thought.
Exactly.
And don't stop questioning.
Keep digging.
Keep searching.
Keep wrestling.
That's where the good stuff is.
That's where the truth is.
That's how we grow.
Thanks for diving deep with us.